All right, Denny, how's it going today? You're pretty busy today, aren't you?
I still have some reports to work on, and also I'm giving feedback orally to my students about their drafts for surveys, questionnaires that they're making right now.
And what sort of feedback are you giving them?
They have to set objectives and then make questions that answer those objectives. They are designing a new product or a new service to the Chinese market, and they will ask possible customers these questions. So they have to word their objectives clearly and also their questions and answers clearly.
What are some of the common mistakes you're seeing that you have to keep on saying again and again to your students?
One of the things I have noticed especially is something like this. How much would you accept for something? And what they mean is, how much do you think is reasonable usually?
Right.
Like how they might say, how much would you accept being charged for some product or service?
And me as a native English speaker would say nothing. I want it free
Right, right.
because
And
the connotation of how much would you accept? The idea is that, well, this is voluntary. It's not a price like in the supermarket, and it's not. I mean, it's not mandatory, but it's a sale price. Maybe there's some negotiation, but you don't have much of a choice in it.
right. Or at what level do you find is reasonable? How much would you usually pay for?
Right.
So
So
I guess it,
what was the were you teaching them that construction instead to ask about the reasonable rate, or what were you trying to encourage them to do?
right. I would explain to them, and this is on a one-to-one or two students to me basis, just a pair or an individual basis giving this feedback. I don't actually teach them very much. They have coursework and videos. I'm here to supplement and then also to advise them on their reports and then assess
Right.
what they write.
Modern teaching.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you comfortable with this style of teaching, mostly online, and maybe your students are watching videos that were maybe made a couple of years ago or something?
I don't have easy access to their study materials.
Right.
So I'm going blind sometimes in terms of we have a weekly teachers meeting to be certain with other teachers teaching the same material and somebody, a manager for us. But
Okay.
not being able to see the material makes it so that I can't tell the students, well, on page dot 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 or in video dot dot dot. I I, I don't know. Therefore, when they are complaining or say that they haven't studied something, I'm not in a position to say, well, it's not in the materials,
Right.
but I
So
don't have,
how do you usually bridge this gap?
well, my students in this kind of situation, for example, giving feedback to them for something like this in the report. Our last topic, the paraphrasing, this was a big issue too,
Right.
because it seems like the materials that they had used to study paraphrasing this term didn't do a good enough a job. Now, after the feedback, they understood the situation,
Right. No, that's
but
good.
it's a challenge. Yes.
So we were thinking about some pronunciation and intonation work because you're busy with your students and I'm busy taking this course. And one of the things that I have to study now is pronunciation. And I was wondering how you are able to teach your students pronunciation or intonation, or basically how to speak the English language, the English words, since you're more directly in the classroom than I am at this point. what are some of the common issues that you see or hear, and how do you address them?
I typically avoided teaching pronunciation. I have some hearing problems, which makes it a bit more of a challenge for me. That said, of course, I've learned about how to do it and I have done it. The thing is, most of this, almost all the pronunciation teaching I have done was before the coronavirus, but more importantly, I was teaching face to face.
Right.
Trying to explain to students the different sounds without them being able to see the teeth, the tongue, without me being able to see it.
Hmm.
For example, in English, the and th sounds are not in most languages. And trying to make sure the students are bringing the tongue out between their teeth
The, the,
is
the,
so challenging.
the. So you mean like the and what was it? It'd be three and the, right? Those would be two examples.
Right,
So
yes,
three is the th sound, and the
that,
is the
right.
that the. Yes, this is a common issue because what happens is that, especially you've taught in China, you are still teaching Chinese students. We hear this quite a bit with our students, not just from China, but from a lot of East Asian countries that
Yes.
they make it into a s sound. So it's, instead of think, it's sink. Not just East Asia. This happens quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
So with that, how do you help them hear the difference?
There's the problem is that I can't be sure about what they are hearing from their headset or from their computer. And and the best I can hope is I might provide a website that, or my students are able to access video hosting websites similar to YouTube.
Right.
And they can practice listening to that. So at least I know if they can hear their sample correctly, that it is correct, because I don't have time in the classroom to spend working with students on their pronunciation.
I
30
don't think any
students.
of us do. This is the problem with big classrooms, big classes, is that you lack that. What would you call it? It's not. Is it speech pathology or like
Yes.
where you deal with the actual formation of like dealing with the mouth muscles and not just pronunciation issues, but any speech impediments that people have. But I mean that's a very specialist subject
Yeah.
area.
So
But in terms of the stuff that you give them, so what would some of the materials be that you use to sort of draw their attention to this these mispronunciations?
there are, it's important that the students be able to see the word that is being said along with the sound, coupling them. It helps first with their listening ability, but also listening to how we might not say the whole part of a word, or we might combine words together, how things may change depending on the context.
Hmm.
One of the websites I use frequently is called Breaking News English. I shall do a screen share of this website.
Okay.
Uh, can you see it?
Yes.
I have been using the website for 7 or 8 years now, and I've used it in the classroom face to face very often, very much. And it allows you to choose your level, level 0 being basic, level 6 being the highest. Level 0 to 3 is about the same article or topic. Levels 4 to 6 is another topic. Difficulty, the higher up, the harder the vocabulary, the harder the grammar. We'll take, yes,
Sure. Let's take a look at one of these levels.
we'll take a level 3 as an example.
All right.
There are there are hundreds and hundreds of articles. There are some different topics if someone's looking for something specifically. We'll take ability to move to the beat of music is genetic.
All right, let's learn something here.
The article, there will be 2 paragraphs. And as I said, the vocabulary is a little bit more basic, the grammar is more basic. Up above, you see here there's listen and 5 speeds.
Oh,
Somebody
okay.
can come in and remember, you're level 3. This is level 0.
Okay.
You need to come down and here you go, level 3. What you can do is you can play it and you can listen. You can read and listen at the same time. So you can listen to specific sounds, as we were talking about, like the or the sounds, or the sound,
And
V
the, yeah.
sound can be a challenge sometimes, or R and L.
Another tough one, yes.
And it's clearly labeled which speeds. You can even, if you want, you can download it.
Oh,
If you
good.
have an MP3 player, you want to listen to it while you're driving or doing something else. And they are short. It's short. The slowest speed, 2.5 minutes. Fastest speed, just over 1.5 minutes.
Is that fastest speed, would that be what native or naturalized speakers would speak at, or is it even faster than that?
I've listened to it several times before. I think is
Why would they do
faster
that?
is the one that would be natural. Fastest
Right.
is like similar or akin to lawyers speaking, perhaps.
Oh, like that, like in a commercial or something where they have at the end of the commercial all the rights and the qualifications or whatever you need, the ways that they get out of it.
Right. If students can handle faster, in my opinion, that should be fine.
That's good enough. All right.
But they can listen and they can read at the same time. And they can also record themselves. They can record themselves saying it and compare it to how the person, the gentleman, is speaking and can hear the differences.
Where are they recording themselves?
They can
On this website or on their own phone?
on their own phone. I was unclear.
Okay.
On their own phone, their own computer.
So how would you get them to, or how would they be able to sort of self-check or self-verify their speech compared to this MP3 file? How do you suggest they do that?
They can look for specific segments, short words or phrases, play it with the gentleman, and then play themselves and compare the two. I guess if they have complicated software, then they could upload both and also try to compare it that way. But the easiest would just be play a piece, a very short piece, a few seconds, and then themselves. Or have maybe someone they are studying with
Check what they're
listen,
saying.
right, and give them feedback.
The problem then, though, is whether or not the other person thinks it's a correct pronunciation.
Which can be a problem,
It
yes.
can be a problem. If students are looking for free software, actually, I can recommend Audacity, Audacity. That is an open source free audio editor. And I know what you mean that they can compare, because with Audacity, you could import the MP3 file, and then you can import or even record your own right into the program. And I'm thinking that when you said that they can check their pronunciation, that they could actually zoom in to the waveforms. Now, that's a bit more complicated. Possibly some people don't want to do that. This can be done on most cell phones that have a sound recorder as well. I know the last 2 or 3 cell phones I've had, they all have a sound recorder that shows the waves, like the actual wave
Yes.
file, which is helpful. But again, this would require some technical know-how in order to maybe derive a lot of benefit from it or get a lot of benefit from it. With this website, so it's a lot about you have listening exercises. You said that they can record themselves. What else does this website give you for your classes?
For my classes specifically, I was doing more conversational English. I would use this as a starting point, and then as I had very small classes, 4 to 7 students. So I could work with them on their conversational abilities and also pronunciation.
Right.
We would read it, and then we would talk about maybe what could happen in the future because of this, or how can this be avoided, or what things do we see, in this case in Vietnam, that is where I was teaching, that are similar, or what do they see in Vietnamese news that is connected to this. We could have, depending on the topic, conversation for an hour on just one question, depending on what the students would say.
So with this conversation that could go on, are you focusing on fluency? Are you focusing on accuracy? And if they have any pronunciation issues, how do you deal with that?
For most of the classes, especially in this part, it's fluency. If it comes to a point where the grammar is distracting or makes it so that it's not understood or not easily understood, I will remember it. And after we're done talking, I will go to the whiteboard and just review it a little bit. And not specifically mentioning which student made the mistake. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
For the
Chances are a
pronunciation,
lot of students are either, if they didn't make the mistake, then they're wondering to themselves, well, if the teacher didn't say anything, is that right or wrong?
if they catch the mistake, yeah.
Right, yes.
And
So
similarly, yes,
what would you say is the most common sort of pronunciation mistake that you hear?
as well for especially students from East Asia, L and R, the TH sounds, the V sound, and the in Chinese, you have initials and finals, and the finals always end in a vowel kind of sound. But in English, we can have a strong D or a strong T or a strong S. For example, my son's name is Lucas. His grandmother will say Lucas,
Okay.
not Lucas. And trying to break that habit, it takes a little while, but the students can hear it. But trying to
Yeah,
stop them is another challenge.
I've heard that with my Korean students before. They break up a word into segments, and it has to deal with something about how Korean speakers breathe, like the breathing of a language can affect how the pronunciation is. So you mentioned 2 problems, one at the beginning of a word and one at the end of the word. We talked about how to practice the beginning. What about the ending? This S sound or the hard D or the T.
I have not had to handle it with Chinese students as such.
Any other
Well,
students?
well, with my Vietnamese students, the problem isn't so much D and T, it's that they drop the last sound of the word.
Completely.
Yes, completely.
Okay.
And and that is a holdover from Vietnamese. They don't say the last letters usually. I I haven't had, I have to deal with the repercussion. That is, I have to deal with the effect, especially with my Chinese students. And I can mention it to them, but that's about as much as I can do. They cognitively, right?
Right.
They understand it, but I'm not, I don't know very much about speech instruction for this problem, for example, and how to get them from making a sound.
Right. I think a lot of us English teachers, we do focus mostly on that the front, the first portion of the word, and we kind of neglect the ending portion, mostly because that's probably the one that's easier to enunciate. Like you can point out a hard D when you teach the past tense, like the ed ending,
Right.
or any other past
Yes.
tense in general. Past, or did he he drank milk? That's a little bit different, but it's a hard K at the end there. So things like that, it's easier to emphasize in class than to work on the first part of the word itself, which can be a little tricky and requires a lot more demonstrations sometimes.
I have a
So
question.
sure.
In American English, we will say China or panda, but I know in British English, in a lot of words, they have a very soft R sound sometimes. How about Canadian English? Is it more like the American? Is it more like the British, or it
Oh,
depends
it's
on the
very
person?
very similar to American English. Yeah, we don't add that R sound. You're talking about when people, same with, like if they say the word ideal, they'll say idear, uh, or China will be Chiner. So that's
Yes.
very common. Yeah, that's more of a British accent, British dialect. Not in Canada, we are very similar to the American pronunciation. If China, panda, ideal. Matter of fact, I would almost say that I can recognize people who are from Minnesota or North Dakota because they have what I call a very clean accent. And by that, I mean it's very similar to my own because I come from the prairies of Canada. And I've been told by more than one sources that I do have a very clear pronunciation, but maybe that's just my ego.
Yeah, see, you could pass as American almost any day of the week. And everybody knows Americans don't have accents.
Thank you. Or is that a good thing or a bad thing?
But you talking about that right now, I just remember my grandfather. My grandfather was born and grew up in Brooklyn, a part of New York City.
Right.
And so specifically in Brooklyn, they also have this soft R sound because I can hear his voice. And when I think about it now,
How would it sound? But a soft Brooklyn R. I've never heard of
I
this.
I I can't.
Tough to replicate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was born there, but I certainly didn't grow up there. I can't do it.
Right. All right. Well, this has been very informative. It's good so far. Good to hear that you're able to at least help your students along the way with some of their university, their ideas, their essays and stuff, and then also their pronunciation. I know for this course that I'm working on right now, it's a big component where we have to deal with phonology and dealing with intonation, stress. I guess the only other question I would have is do you ever use the phonemic chart?
And I was going to ask you something about this also. In the United States, growing up, I had classmates who were from other countries, and I had friends from other countries in elementary school and in high school, and I saw some of the material that they use. And for example, if you look at the back of an American English dictionary printed in America, you're not going to find the phonemic table at all. it will give you other things, and if you already know how to make that sound, then you correctly, then that's how you use it. And that's it. And similarly, in public schools, you will see the same kind of thing. In private language schools, I saw that table. The table, from my point of view, I understand why people like to use it and rely on it. But what I found was if they do that, if that's how they're introduced to speaking English, then they don't learn how, they don't develop skills about how to guess until they are maybe advanced students. Whereas if you don't provide it to them from the beginning, they pay more attention to look for patterns. It's not perfect. And as I explain to my students, when I come across a new word, because English takes words from so many different languages, but even if it's a native English word, whatever that might mean,
Yeah, what is a native English word?
I I may get it wrong and I'll need to listen to someone say it or look, I'll need to find somebody to say it to me.
Yeah. I know that with my studies here, the phonemic chart, they do promote us using it. Uh, not actually, not so much using it in a classroom situation, but understanding it and understanding how to implement it. So if a student is having trouble, and this is probably more for lower level students, but also if you ever use a dictionary with higher level students, pointing out the phonemic transcription of the word is sometimes helpful just to give them just a little bit more uh, help in figuring out the pronunciation and then making sure that they can take that phonemic, that sound, and connecting it with other phonemes or other sounds that they've heard before that they're familiar with. And then that way it's not so strange because in English, you know, a word like enough, you know, Enough,
Oh,
right?
yes,
But then you transcribe it using the phonemic chart, and all of a sudden they get it. The issue then becomes like, is the GH always an F, or is it not?
right.
So is it ever not an F? Good question. I've
Well, I
never thought of that.
remember, isn't OUGH? I think I saw memes or something about this where there's 5 or 10 different ways, depending on the word, to pronounce those letters.
And also, I'm thinking actually some Australian words and like or like slew, Slough,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So there, sorry, that's not Australian, but that's an example of a word
Right.
that's using GH in a different format. So, which is where the phonetic chart, I don't know, would that help there? Phonemic chart, would that
And
help
read
at
it,
all?
yes. Yes.
All right, well, good. I think we will end it there. I know you're busy and you've got your whole afternoon ahead of you, but I've got to get back to my studies as well. All right,
Sure.
thanks, Denny. I appreciate it. We'll talk again.
Sure. See you later, Steve.